Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are going to get started with our last panel of the day, Differentiation and Engagement Through Content, led by Jean DeLibero, Chief Strategy Officer and Head Consulting at Geek Hive. Over to you, Jean.
Thanks, Davina. Welcome, everyone, and welcome to our panelists. Let me introduce everyone quickly, and then we'll dig right in. We have Andrew Cassidy. He is the Director of Social Media at MBTA. Amanda Bellis, the Communications and Marketing Manager at Second Nature. Martha Sheridan, President and CEO of the Greater Boston Convention and Visitors Bureau. And Kara Walker is the VP Marketing and Content Strategy for the Boston Celtics. So again, welcome everyone. It's a big topic we have going on here, differentiation and engagement through content. And as we all know, COVID-19 has brought us face to face with the unknown, the unexpected. It's very hard to be future ready when things like this are happening out in the space. And for many marketers like us, what we know worked well before suddenly kind of feels foreign, right? In the world of lockdowns and socially distant interaction. So how are you guys using content in a space like this, in a time like this, where things are kind of upside down? How are you using content to tell authentic stories that really help you build connections and community between your brand and your target audiences, and maybe even between themselves? Kara?
Sure, I've heard it touched on a couple times today, but for us through all of this, the most important thing has been authenticity, like you mentioned, but also making sure that we strike the right tone and that everything that we're doing is appropriate for the moment. So we're a sports team, we're a basketball team. Basketball is important, especially with everything going on in the world. We can be an outlet for people when things get really heavy. It can give people a way to disconnect and to have some levity. But we also understand that what we're doing isn't saving lives, and there are much bigger things that people are dealing with and serious things. So we've tried to really use our platform to help spread important messages. We sell Celtics branded masks, and we show content of our players wearing masks. We have really leaned into everything going on with the social injustice issues going on in the world. But then we also try and balance that with the basketball content, which is what we're really about. So I think finding that right balance has been the biggest challenge. But for us, doing that authentically just means not trying to force any message that's not there, but figure out ways that we're already part of the conversation and helping to educate our fans, use our platform, use our voice, and also recognize our place in everything.
Cool. Martha, what about you?
So we've, clearly the tourism industry has been profoundly impacted, as has professional sports and probably everyone's sector here on this call. But found ourselves having to play a variety of roles beyond our typical marketing and core advocacy roles. We have to become an arbiter of information for our members and partners, for the community, but also for the consumer. And we have to do that with transparency and complete honesty. And sometimes for us, being honest, particularly with consumers, means that we're negatively impacting our stream of business, because we have to tell people from certain states that, no, you can't visit here. We have to tell our members that would like to host a meeting that you can't have any more than 25 people. And so for us, it's really been about, and authenticity and transparency are, I think, important no matter what the situation is. But for us, it's really been trying to become that liaison between government entities that are providing us with the information and our business partners, helping them understand the information, and then the consumers, so that they can make the best and most educated decision when it comes to whether or not they are comfortable traveling to Boston or not at this time.
Excellent. Andrew, I know when we talked previously, you had mentioned a little bit about storytelling, and the word authenticity was kind of important to you. Can you share a little bit around what you guys are doing?
Absolutely. So for us, it's been changing since the moment the words COVID were mustered out. Initially, everyone was kind of looking for information. There was a lot of concerns surrounding public transportation in the time of a pandemic. At the very onset, this is back in February, we're already cleaning and disinfecting stations every 4 hours, and really just wanted to make sure that people knew that we were paying close attention. We were monitoring what the CDC was talking about, and that we were doing everything we could to keep our riders safe. So that was really important messaging. But as the pandemic progressed, as people were increasingly staying at home, so too did our messaging, and so too did what authenticity really looked like. For us, content became a clamoring for information from our riders. So that's where we started putting together weekly updates from our general manager, just to really be able to hear straight from the source, to understand what efforts we're taking, what difficulties we're encountering, what provisions we're trying to secure for both our workforce as well as for our ridership, and making sure that was happening very frequently. The first video that we put out, is just me and my iPhone, because we just knew we had to get messaging out there. Eventually we were able to make it a little bit more polished, and get the messaging out. But we were soliciting questions, day after day, and utilizing that to kind of feed the content. So we knew we were really hitting on exactly what it is our riders as well as our employees wanted to hear about.
Just to
I read
comment
something.
on what
Yeah, go
Andrew
ahead,
was
Martha.
saying. I think the weekly messaging at a minimum has been key as well. And I think from our perspective, we make sure that it comes from me as the CEO. And we found that we really have become almost that lifeline between our members and our partners and the entities that we're getting information from. And I think they've really appreciated our candor and the fact that they do hear from us frequently and the information they're getting is unadulterated.
Yeah, I think that's important. I just one follow-up question for you, Andrew. I read something today about New York State. I don't know if I have the numbers right, but basically it said something like people who are riding public transportation, buses, they need to wear a mask. If you're not wearing a mask, you're going to be fined $50. So, when things like that are handed down, again, something else that's not in your control, do you find yourself kind of behind the curve, or are you guys prepared, with your content and prepared with your outreach to address that? Because you're going to have people who are not happy, and even some people that might not understand what the true requirement is. So how are you guys dealing with that?
So the entire communications arm is really plugged in to the decision-making components of the MBTA. So that gives us a little bit more advance notice and agility to be able to respond to whatever is going on. We do not have that same implementation. It is a requirement to wear a face covering while utilizing the MBTA, both for employees and for riders. But as of right now, there's no fine or anything associated with that. So it's really about reinforcement. We launched a campaign over the summer called Ride Safer, and it was really for helping our ridership learn a new behavior, how to utilize something that had been familiar, that they had used over 1,000 times before, but using it in a pandemic. And it was just going through the motions of reminding people that they needed to, stay 6 feet apart, whether it be, going through your fare gate, whether it be, boarding a vehicle, what have you, reminding people that they need to wear a face covering at all times. But also worked with, the reassurance of the in-depth cleaning that we're doing day in and day out, cleaning our stations every 4 hours, cleaning our vehicles, usually twice a day, and then showing even the details there because, again, people need this reassurance, and we've seen this throughout the entire pandemic. Despite the fact that ridership has dropped off because so many people are working from home and others have been laid off, despite that, people still are looking to us for information and reassurance as to what our efforts are, what we're doing to keep them safe, and how we can best communicate with both our riders and employees to make it as safe a system as possible.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that. Amanda, Second Nature it's a little bit different, right? For you guys, you're an NGO, so maybe you could share that different perspective with us.
Yeah, I'd love to. So the work we do, we work directly with higher education institutions. And so they're not clients, they're more partners. We essentially support them in the work they do to accelerate climate action. And so obviously when COVID hit, in March, as we all know, the colleges and universities were focused on making their campuses safe, getting the students off campus safe, faculty, administrators, and just dealing with all that, transferring it over to remote learning. And so I think as a NGO nonprofit, we knew, while obviously climate change is correlated with this pandemic, and it's, an important issue, at that moment, they were going to be more focused, right, on the safety of their campus. But then once that first initial shock was over, then it was going to be, okay, how can we better support them? They're focused on other things, but they're also still focused on climate change and doing climate action. So we did a lot of things where we reached out to them and we asked them that question. We had those conversations. I think content-wise, what we did more webinars. We provided more electronic tools and resources. I think, it doesn't matter what industry you're a part of. I think what was different about this pandemic is it literally affected every single person around the world in some way. And so in a way, it's like taking a step back and just being human, and being flexible.
Yeah, I think flexibility is important. That's a really good point. So over the last couple of weeks, I've been trying to do a little research and just looking at some of the studies that have been put out. And obviously, since February, March, a lot of the surveys are showing that this new wave of being inside and in the home and not going to offices is having an impact on media consumption. The numbers are going way up. So for example, one of the surveys said that 35% of the respondents said that they're reading more books, lots more audiobooks, and maybe even listening to radio. And then one number that I really latched onto and I want to talk about here is that about 40% of consumers that were interviewed said that they spent way more time on messaging services and social media. Not a surprise, but thinking about that as it applies to your brand and your business, it's not surprising, but it is compelling. Are you finding, when you look at your audience analytics, is that aligning with this trend? And if so, how are you meeting the needs of those that are using more messaging and social media? How are you meeting them where they are and giving them what they need and want? Who wants to go first?
Go
ahead. No, go ahead, Amanda.
Go ahead, Martha.
Mine'll be quick, don't worry. I'm just going to say, I think, again, because we work with higher ed institutions all over the place, across the nation, we kind of already were using a lot of social media, a lot of Zoom calls and, go-to meeting webinars and everything. So I think it was just a ramp up of those technologies. Yeah, and again, it's having those conversations. How can we better support you and at this time and figuring that out? So having that conversation.
Okay. Martha?
For us, from a partner perspective, we latched on to the concept of providing information electronically very early on. And, we've used a lot of the webinar tactics available to us. And initially, people just gravitated towards it. We did our first webinar, featured Mayor Walsh, and it was early on in the pandemic, and we had over 1,000 people on it. And then we did one with myself and two of our counterparts, and we still had very, very high numbers. And we've continued to do them. We're doing them every week, and now we're down to about every other week or every third week. And the numbers have definitely dwindled because I think there's a certain fatigue setting in. But we did meet people where they are, and we did the same with consumers. We knew that our arts institutions were struggling immensely, and we also knew that people locked in their homes early on really wanted access to different types of content. So we curated a lot of virtual content from our museums and our cultural institutions, the Children's Museum, et cetera. And we fed that up to our consumer audiences. And it really, we recognized that it was something that they were really craving because there were kids at home. They hadn't started homeschooling yet. They were just trying to figure out, what can I do with my kids? So, we tried to pivot as much as we could. And we also are finding that our paid social right now is having higher stats than it had previously, because as you said, people are spending more time on those channels.
Okay, that makes sense. So just out of curiosity, what was what was their favorite content?
From our website, or
Uh-huh.
the consumers, I would say the aquarium did really well because of
Okay.
being able to access it, anything from the Museum of Science. So yeah, we tried to cater to a variety of audiences. So I think each of them did well in their own right.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a testament to the right content, right? Dedicating the right content to the right people and not putting everything in one big bucket, right? You have to have the right message for the right people. So kudos to you guys for
Absolutely.
doing that. What about you, Kara?
Everything about the Celtics is a little bit different, and especially this year. We've seen some of those trends. We've seen definitely our metrics have changed, but for us, it also, we sort of dealt with the pandemic at first and then the hiatus of the NBA and then coming back. So right now we're in the middle of the playoffs, which would normally be happening at the start of the summer. And so it's hard for us to compare, but early on we were seeing, I guess I would say, higher engagement with types of content that usually doesn't engage so highly. So we were really going back into our archives. We didn't have basketball happening live at the time. So we were really using a lot of historical content, a lot of community content. But what we really took advantage of, I think, are two things. We had a lot more forgiveness from our audience. I think that usually everything we try to do from a content standpoint is very polished. We are the Boston Celtics. We really try and do things at a high level. But what we were finding was people started to understand that, hiccups on Zoom calls happen. Everybody's been on that call where the internet cuts out, or, you're talking over someone. And all of a sudden that kind of became a little bit more acceptable. So we really leaned into that. And we did things like we created content via Zoom calls with our players because we couldn't access them in person. And we put out, more cell phone video than we would normally. And that, I think, was the biggest surprise for me, that type of content, we really didn't see a noticeable difference between something that was more like that and something that was more traditional, highly polished content.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense. That makes sense. What about you, Andrew?
So analytics are always driving what we're doing. And it was very interesting going into the pandemic and kind of the different ways in which we were utilizing them. So at the very onset, we were doing a lot of social listening to identify specific concerns, as well as specific issues that we might be having on our system that in regards to social distancing, frequency of busing. Again, you have to think back early days, March, April. There's a lot of fear, and we're doing everything we can to meet those needs while ensuring that our staff can stay safe so we can continue to deliver service. So it's very interesting to go formulate reports to via just social listening to then create system changes where we were running different service for medical personnel going to certain hospitals, and nurses and doctors coming in from different towns to make sure that they could get where they needed to be, and truthfully where the entire state needed them to be. As that went on, again, we kind of had a video first and social first strategy just going into 2020 as it was, so that worked out fairly well. But there's a reason that we've kept with the GM updates, where we're utilizing video to have that honest conversation. We do still, we've changed the cadence a little bit based off of that engagement. Early days, people wanted to hear, at least once a week, and realistically, we were sometimes offsetting our efforts with a social post and then a video from the GM, just to make sure that the latest and greatest was always, right in front of our ridership. As that progressed, things moved a lot more slowly. And we wanted to make sure that we weren't just shooting video to shoot video. We wanted to make sure that there was value in everything that we did, which is why they moved to more of a monthly cadence at this point. But simultaneously, while that was going on, we continued our efforts in building a better T. So that's our whole capital development program, where we're reinvigorating the infrastructure of the MBTA. The lower ridership has also created an interesting opportunity for us, truthfully, where we're able to expedite some work to get some projects done more quickly, while ridership isn't actually utilizing the service, or at least utilizing it to a lesser extent. And because we're getting so many varying opinions from our ridership on a daily from social media, whether it be, what are you doing? Why aren't you accelerating work? Why aren't you handing out X, Y, and Z? We always need to have that, pulse on how our ridership feels, to be able to, have that inform our messaging, so that we have these, video wrap ups saying that, one of the big things that we've been doing recently was the green line surge. We're able to, get done in a year what in just a month. And part of that, we're able to even expand the scope of that. And again, part of that is due to the lower ridership. And then, moving from there, now the lower ridership is also having financial impacts for the MBTA, and it's communicating the very real situation that we're facing right now, which, many of us all are, which is, as people stop utilizing our services, as people aren't attending, or as revenue streams are definitely being impacted by COVID, then it's also managing expectation and keeping people in the loop, rather than just all of a sudden something happening, making sure that they're aware that this is a concern for us, they're aware of what efforts we're undergoing, just to kind of keep everything moving forward, keep everyone well apprised, and whether they agree or disagree, at least they know where things stand for us.
Yeah, and just as a follow-up to that, very interesting. I'm curious. So you're doing some listening, right? You're eliciting information from your riders. Are you taking the information that you gather and actioning some of it? I mean, you can't action all of it, right? But
No,
there's got to be some
absolutely, though.
things that make sense. I mean, it's kind of like car companies. Some luxury car companies use social quite a bit in order to solicit from their user base, their fans, their drivers, whoever it might be, their customers, the types of things they'd like to see in the car, performance, right? How the cabin is built, or colors, or whatever it might be. So for you guys, if you're doing that listening, I mean, how frequently would you say that you incorporate the things that you're hearing into, real life activation?
I mean, it depends on what people are talking about. Some things are just adding to the advocacy of what we're trying to do. Again, everyone at the early onset wanted, hand sanitizer installed in every single station. We've been able to install a hand sanitizer in stations, but one of the realities was that it was hard to procure for the longest time. So kind of having, hearing people, letting, operation side of the house know what people are looking for. And then sometimes we are able to act on it. So case in point, like the nurses and doctors who were saying, hey, I need to get to this particular hospital, and the service right now is forcing us to bunch up a little bit too much. Back in, I think that was either end of March or maybe just beginning of April, we were actually able to make those changes to those routes and to that frequency. So social was able to figure out which routes, where people were coming from, and we use that to inform our schedules as well. So we're always doing that. We're always reporting back. We're fortunate in that the organization as a whole does respect social, and it does respect the opinions of its riders. So we're always giving the reports, whether it be daily, weekly, and slicing it, 1,000 different ways, just to make sure that we're as informed as possible whenever we're making any sort of large scale decisions that might impact riders or employees down the road.
Okay. One of the other things I read was another study from, I don't know, I think it was Social Bakers. And what they said that, again, not surprising, but they found that there was a dramatic increase in activity around things like podcasts, videos, Facebook Live videos, just all different platforms where convergent media is used, especially audio and video. And I think what you had said, Andrew, was that video is becoming a go-to for you guys. And I'm wondering, for the rest of you, maybe Amanda, we can start with you. Is video something that's important for you now that these changes have come and we're in this different kind of environment?
So that's a good question. I would say as a nonprofit, and we're not really selling a brand, if that makes sense, or selling a product. we're working with these higher education institutions. I was more ramping up what we were already using. Like we have a monthly e-newsletter, so ramping up that. We have other newsletters, ramping up more social, ramping up those conversations, so phone calls, Zoom calls, webinars, doing a lot more. So as far as video goes, I wouldn't say so, but
Okay.
definitely a ramp up of the other mechanisms for sure.
Okay. Kara? I mean, there's no one in the venue, right now, so it's a little bit different, but I mean, you guys have a prime opportunity to really move to that, because that consumption is there, that desire is there.
Yeah, I mean, video has always been huge for us, both the live game aspect, now, playing in the bubble. Hopefully we'll have a lot of Celtics fans on the call. Everybody should tune in at 9 p.m. tomorrow night. We have a pretty big game 7, but the interesting one for me, from what you were saying, Jean, is podcasts. We've had a lot of conversations about getting into advertising on podcasts, which we hadn't done previously. Mm-hmm. And I sort of expected listenership to be down, because personally I would listen to podcasts on my commute. But from what we've seen and read and heard, that's not at all the case. And so that's one area that we're looking to ramp up, not only our advertising, but we're also exploring Celtics podcast. And we've been talking about that for quite a while. And all of a sudden now, during everything that's happening, seems like it could end up being the perfect time to launch one, because, for us and for a lot of consumers, the appetite is just endless. People are looking for content. There's nothing to do except for consume content a lot of times. And especially now that we look to the fall and the winter and the weather, not cooperating any longer, people are going to be stuck inside and they're going to be looking for good content to consume. So we feel like it's a huge opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like the fact that, you weren't, I mean, obviously you're focused on your base and your fans, but I like, when you talk about engagement, I like the fact that you're also thinking about advertisers and sponsorship opportunities, because, revenue has to play in. You still have to pay for the venue. You still have to pay salaries. I mean, people have to get paid. So not only do you need to engage your fan base, but you also need to engage your advertisers. You don't want them to go away. So I like that. I like what I'm hearing there. What about you, Martha?
Our corporate partners have been a key part in this for us.
Is that right?
We had to stay in constant contact with them and make sure that we're fulfilling whatever we can. So a lot of our sponsorship deals have heavy hospitality and signage in the arena, which we haven't been able to deliver. So a lot of that burden has fallen onto my team with digital content. And I think that's an important piece. And then also, Andrew mentioned before, employees. That's one that we as a content team haven't really had to think about that much before, but now it's trying to get the message out, not only to our fans and our partners, but also employees, because it's such an important time and everyone is just sort of lost in some ways. And so they're looking to whoever they can as an authority. And sometimes that ends up being the company or the brand that they work for.
Martha, before we go to you, just one more question for Kara. So have these sponsors, have your participating sponsors been proactive, or have you had to reach out? Have they been waiting to just see what's next?
Some more than others. We have dozens of partners, and some that have been with us for decades and decades that we really consider true partners. So they're actually helping us make the decisions, and we're having conversations with them regularly. Some are a bit more passive, but we've tried to be proactive there, because our business, there are a lot of parallels for us through all this. As a sports team, inevitably we go through highs and lows of the team on the court, and we can't control those. And so in our down years on the court, we still try and make sure we deliver a really high level of service to our fans and our partners so that they stick with us through those times. And this is really similar to that in some ways. It's, we have all the people who were on board before all this happened, and we really are trying to make sure that we give the attention to those relationships, so that when it does come time for these companies to make difficult financial decisions, we make it a little bit easier for them to say, the Boston Celtics are a crucial partner of ours, and we have to continue that partnership, even if it means tightening our belts in some other place.
Wow, that's awesome. Martha, I would assume that, multimedia has been important for you, but maybe even more so now. So how are you pivoting toward this idea of, podcasts, videos, alternate platforms like Facebook Live? How's that working for you, or not?
Well, so early on in the pandemic, we really needed to be sensitive to how we could keep Boston top of mind, but not appear as though we were promoting, quote unquote, at a time when it was just impossible for anyone to travel anywhere. So we did end up working with a local firm and developed a video that we felt was really appropriate for the moment. Talking about, we can't wait to have you back. And we just showed iconic scenes of Boston, and we pretty much peppered it all over our channel, social, et cetera. We so far have over 500,000 impressions for that video, and it's been really well received. It just made people think about, at a very difficult time, what they missed about our city. So that's worked really well for us. The other thing that we've utilized a lot are Instagram stories. And, we've really had to change the type of experience that we're promoting to visitors, because so many of our indoor attractions have been closed for so long. So we really wanted to demonstrate to people how they can still experience Boston, but, stay outdoors if they need to. So, stories about kayaking along the Charles, or, walking the Esplanade, or, the Rose Kennedy, and really just demonstrating to people through these Instagram stories that are still living on our site, what it is they can do here. And I will say, one of the challenges, we were embracing video early on, and we were about to embark upon a 12 video series of Boston neighborhoods. So we had,
Oh, how cool is that?
we were actually scheduled to start filming in March. And, we really want the videos to be evergreen, right? Because they were part of a long-standing promotion. And I think, Andrew, we had alluded to this last year, and we utilized for our color palette the MBTA lines as part of the creative for the program, because we wanted people to take advantage of
Great call. Great call.
get around, right? So anyway, that's changed a bit, but we're kind of peeking our head up above the sand now, and we're trying to figure out a way to relaunch this project in a way that we can still feature neighborhoods. We just don't want to wait until another year or 8 or 10 months. We really feel like the neighborhoods need our help now. So we are going to figure out a way to make this happen, make it evergreen. And Andrew will still, of course, want to partner with you all on this, because eventually people will be back choosing to ride the T once they can. So, video is a challenge, because you want to keep it fresh. And if you're going to invest in it at all, if it's not, organic, although we want everything to look organic, you want to make sure that it does have a lifespan beyond just the immediate. So, try to film without people wearing masks, for instance, is going to be one of our challenges. Or, orange cones in the streets that are providing restaurants with that outdoor seating. How do we capture the outdoor seating, but make it look more like a permanent fixture than a temporary fixture? So we're up to the challenge, and we're going to start that project very soon.
Yeah, that's awesome. Utility and reuse are two things that I heard while you were talking, right? The idea of having content that can be fully utilized across different platforms, and also that evergreen reuse where you can cut it up, and it doesn't necessarily have to be big screen, but it can work in many different ways. On a billboard, maybe in a venue like, where the Celtics are, and also on a small phone. It's the same content, but it's repurposed to serve a different need, and that makes a lot of sense. What about you, Andrew, and multimedia?
Really quick before Andrew.
Yeah, please, Amanda.
Martha, to your point, I think you raised a really good point. About, although you used video, highlighting what's still going on, highlighting that there's neighborhoods you can still safely walk through and everything. And I just want to say, like, from my perspective, and I should have said this before, but we did that as well, but not through video, and I think, again, it's about getting a little creative. So, for example, even though schools obviously are dealing with so much additional, just like everybody else right now, keeping their campuses safe, they are still doing a ton of work when it comes to climate action and combating climate change. And so I think for us as an organization, it's always been important to highlight the work they're doing and support it, and highlight, so-and-so school is doing this project, maybe through social or newsletters. But I think for me, that became even more important to illustrate that even while all this is going on, they're still 100% committed to, accelerating climate action, in addition to taking care of their students, their campuses, etc. So yeah.
That's good stuff. Andrew?
So as I'm looking at who is in this panel right now, it's dawning on me how much the MBTA's interaction with all of these industries has shifted since the pandemic. So case in point, pre-pandemic, I'd say one of our biggest concerns or information that we really needed to share with riders was, hey, you're going to the Celtics game tonight. There's going to be a diversion happening during the game. So the path that you took to get to to North Station and into the Garden will be different from when you're leaving. Post COVID and during COVID, as far as how we're interacting with Visit Boston and Visit Massachusetts, we're now putting out every week virtual visits because there are so many stay-at-home parents, and we wanted to give an opportunity to tie in, what stop you get off at if you were using the system, and let people know that even though they might not be open, they might still be producing content, whether it be New England Aquarium or someone the like, and they had these virtual visits. So that's something that's been ongoing. And then looking even to our interaction with students, our standard would be, hey, welcome to Boston. Here's how you get around. Why don't you take the Freedom Trail? You can do it by the train if you'd like. And now we're re-educating students. Hey, welcome back. This is how you ride the T during the pandemic. You've been away since March for a lot of these students, or this is their first time in the city, or maybe their first time with public transportation, and helping them understand the importance of wearing that face covering, keeping social distance, and still being able to utilize public transportation safely even during a pandemic. So it's really interesting. As far as the multimedia component and what we're doing, video has definitely been king. Social has become excessively important just because it's something that we're able to do very well remotely. We still go out into the field to shoot the videos and grab footage, but with that going out into the field, you can create X amount of content out of that single venture. So it's really valuable to be able to stay up to date, to really get everything out there, whether it be the general manager updates, whether it be time-lapse videos of the construction work that we're getting out. And we also have a renewed focus, I'd say, on Facebook and Instagram stories, just because the formatting worked out very well, because we also had in-station digital signage, which just so happens to be the same exact aspect ratio as Instagram and Facebook stories. So we're able to repurpose a lot of that content, reach an entirely different audience, and maybe put something that works a little bit better there than it would as a traditional post somewhere else. So really not just platform specific, but even like post type specific has been a major focus for us throughout the pandemic.
Okay. And now I think we have about 7 minutes left. This is going to be our last question. And for the last question, let me ask you this. We're hearing that you guys are working across a lot of different channels. And in some cases, it's not just digital, right? We're integrated marketers. There's traditional, there's digital, there's lots of integrated ways that we can reach our target audiences. So the fact that they have access to all these channels and the fact that you're trying to reach them where they are, how are you, cutting through the noise of trying to get their attention and really even stand out, right? So they listen to your message before they listen to someone else's. How are you doing that? What types of strategies and tactics are you guys using to do that in the 7 or so minutes that we have left? Can we start with Amanda?
Sure. Again, being a nonprofit, I think in having these more of, I would say, partnerships with these colleges and universities, in a lot of ways we already had relationships established. And so, being able to directly reach out to them and continue some of those conversations allowed us to continue to support them in the best ways and be flexible in our support based on how things were changing for them. And I think, regardless of what industry you're in, I think flexibility is huge, but also, again, as cliche as it sounds, just being human and realizing this is affecting literally everybody. And so just having those creating those relationships. And in a way, I feel like the pandemic has made us more human, if that makes sense, because to your point, you are being more forced instead of just sending out a tweet, like maybe picking up the phone and actually calling somebody. And, in a way, it's made us take a step back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really important. That human touch is critical. Martha? I think you're on mute.
The famous phrase of the pandemic, "You're on mute."
You're on mute.
We're really utilizing an integrated digital strategy. So we are posting everything across all of our channels so that we make sure that nobody misses it. We're using a lot more paid media, paid search, which is helping us. We're taking advantage of cooperative opportunities with our partners so that, we'll post yours if you post ours type of thing. So it's really just about frequency and reach for us right now. We're hopeful that people seeing it on multiple channels, whether they see it through an e-blast and then and then on social and on our website there and through blogging, they're seeing that same message in numerous places, and that kind of reinforces that message and validates it in many ways as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Kara?
We are sort of taking an opposite approach from Martha, which is what I love about social. We're, I think, trying to exercise a little bit more restraint when it comes to posting across channels. We typically do sort of put our content on every different platform. We're trying to take this time to be a little bit smarter about which of our content pieces works best on each platform. We're really trying to ensure brand consistency. So we want, when someone's scrolling through their feed or when they come across a piece of Celtics content, we want to create that sort of subtle or not so subtle feeling that tells them right away that it's Celtics content, especially because there are so many different outlets producing Celtics content that are not the Celtics. And then I think really just focusing on sort of capturing that attention right away. So we've really made it a priority to ensure that our video content in particular is high energy in the first 3 to 5 seconds. So we make sure that we grab them in, and then, the hope is that they'll stay and consume most of the content, but we really want to make sure that we catch their attention initially.
Okay, makes sense. Andrew, in the 2 minutes that we have left?
Sure. I'd say the two biggest driving forces are empathy and responsibility. The empathy is understanding a lot of our ridership that persisted, especially throughout the pandemic, had no other alternative. They needed to go to work. These were essential people taking essential trips. And on the flip side of that coin, appreciating our workforce, because they're essential people moving essential people. They are, a backbone of the city and the state that often go overlooked, and don't necessarily get clumped in with the nurses and doctors, but are still responsible for getting people from point A to point B and keeping the economy moving. And then the responsibility is, again, people who are utilizing our system, they entrust us to do everything we can to keep them safe, and we're gonna do everything that we can, and it's a shared responsibility. So since there is a component on the rider and the employee themselves, it's keeping them as educated as possible through Ride Safer campaigns and things the like, to let them know what they should be doing to help protect themselves, their fellow passengers, their fellow employees. And that the entirety of the state kind of looks to us to provide that information. The other big thing for just making sure that you stand out, it's not letting other people tell your story. There's a lot of people out there that are more than happy to jump to conclusions and interpret facts or interpret bits of the truth in ways that maybe doesn't really line up with the actual story that's out there. So being quick enough to be out there, not ignoring things. Again, this is why the GM updates became a thing. We needed to get an honest, our GM out there to just tell an honest account of what's going on, what difficulties we're facing, let them know that we care, let them know everything that we're doing. And we've seen positive result from that. I mean, if you want to give any value to sentiment, which I do very, very loosely, there's been a big shift in at least perception and people seeing us as an authority for, throughout the pandemic, and having us be a big source. Even when ridership is down, the follower count keeps going up, and that tells us we're doing at least something right.
Well, that's a perfect note to end on. If you're going to have any type of engagement through content, trust is critically important. So thanks everyone for participating, and thanks for everyone for joining us.
Thank you so much to our panelists. I would like to thank all of our speakers today, all of our attendees, and our sponsors. Thank you so much to Onshape, Simplify, Effective, and Geek Hive. We will be sending out a recording of today's session, so please be on the lookout. Until then, please stay safe, and we hope to see you next time.